Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news truly from a Catholic perspective, news and views, that is. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my co-hosts, Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. And we do want to mention that there will be mature content covered in this episode of The Catholic View for Women. Important content, but mature content, so viewer discretion is advised. We're going to be talking about the damage, and lots of damage caused by the sexual revolution. And it's amazing that we're going to try to tackle this topic in about 25 minutes, because we could go on and on and on, because I always say that the sexual revolution, whether we're talking about the birth control issues such as a pill or abortion, it's like this giant octopus that had his tentacles everywhere, sucking the life, literally, out of so many people, families, and society.
That means that who hasn't been touched by the, or knows somebody who's been gravely hurt by the sexual revolution. And basically it works on based on two lies. Basically, the first lie being that, sex has nothing to do with procreation, sex has nothing to do with marriage, and that procreation sometimes doesn't have anything to do with sex, And the second myth is that men and women don't matter. They're interchangeable. Mom and dad doesn't matter, So these are two lies that the sexual revolution teaches the world, and the world has been just so deceived, and now we have all of these victims.
That's right. Well, there are so many victims. I mean, first of all, with my work with the Silent No More Awareness campaign, we start with the women who've had abortions, obviously, post-abortive women. And now we could say the fathers too, and men. They're victims of the sexual revolution because, again, they're told when your contraception fails, well, you have abortion as a backup, and they don't realize the consequences of that action, what's going to happen to them. They know it's a baby, but the circumstances, they feel, okay, we're just going to have this abortion, but then they realize it wasn't a giant eraser, and the problems they have just stay with them for years and years to come.
What are some of the, because I'm always so interested to listen to the testimonies at the Supreme Court every year at the March for Life of the men and women, the Silent No More. More and more men are coming forward. Tell our viewers what are some of the things that men are saying about their experience.
Well, with men, they have a two-edged sword here, because some of the men said to the girl, well, do what you want, it's up to you, or you have to have that abortion or I'm leaving you, and then they would leave them anyway.
Some maybe didn't even know.
Some didn't even know that she was pregnant, and she hid the pregnancy and hid the abortion from them, and they found out years later. Others tried to stop them from having the abortion, and they couldn't, because legally they have no right, and they said, please, this is our child, please don't do this, and they did it anyway. So for the men, it's a whole mixed bag of emotions. And very often, just like with the women, the men are told it's no big deal, so you should be moving on. So if they start to feel horrible about what has happened, the death of their child, no one's saluting that or giving them a sense or even listening to them. Yes. So their grief is very compounded, and they have a lot of the same problems the women have. Many abuse drugs and alcohol just to numb the pain. They get into addictive behaviors, obsessed with pornography or gambling, become workaholics. I mean, it's kind of the same scenario. Do anything they can do to forget what had happened, to deal with that pain.
In the Hispanic community, we have that as well. But whenever I speak about abortion in the radio or TV, we get Hispanic people calling us grandmothers, the uncles of aborted babies. I mean, that really just need to deal with it. For the first time, somebody's acknowledging the pain, that they are victims as well, and they want to grieve this lost child. And what you realize with the sexual revolution is that it's made to benefit the adults, quote unquote, because we see that it causes pain. But the ones who suffer the most are the children, the innocent victims that cannot defend themselves.
Right. Well, and of course, one of the people who speaks a lot about this is our dear friend, Jennifer Robeck Morse. And she was going to have some resources on our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. But one of the things she did, which I thought, I know all of us have been to her talks, which are amazing.
Yes.
But one of the things she did was she outlined a nice list, and I just want our viewers to listen to this list.
This is pretty. Everyone out there in our viewing audience can relate to one of these.
Somebody here. Okay. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about these different categories. But is this you? Are you a child of divorce? A child of unmarried parents? Number 3, reluctantly divorced man or woman. Number 4, reluctantly single. Number 5, a broken-hearted career woman.
That was me.
Okay. Number 6, donor-conceived person. And that's a whole group that is emerging now. And more of those people are finding out and coming forward and talking about how they're feeling. Number 7 is a pornography addict and their families and how they're affected. Number 8 is, of course, like we just discussed, post-abortive man or woman. Number 9 is gay lifestyle refuge. Number 10 is refuge from the hookup culture. And as we know, Astrid, we've talked about that, a lot on a previous series, because you out there with friends in the dating world, the hookup culture is so strong, so strong. Number 11, of course, is are you a cohabitator with regret? Meaning, did you live together with multiple people, maybe at different times, and you break up, and then you regret.
You were told that it was a good thing, preparation for marriage.
Right. Preparation for marriage, live with them, right? And of course, number 12, people with health problems due to the hookup culture, contraception, and abortion, which we know the health problems are huge.
Yeah.
This is all because of the sexual revolution, all these problems that
which was supposed to solve all of our problems, and then it just created a whole host of problems. Do we think, and let me ask your opinions on this, ladies, because I go back and forth on this issue, because I deal with this all the time in my work and also on my radio show as well. Do you think we're getting any better at getting through to society and the people out there of the damage, of the complete, total fallout of the sexual revolution? Or is it worse in terms of the culture, the mass media, Hollywood, news media, advertising, just continuing to embrace? We talked earlier in another episode about now this whole transgender push, and you were mentioning in another show about how in the young people you deal with in your work, and when you were in college it was bad enough, and now it's 10 times worse. The indoctrination, the hookup culture, the emphasis on sexual promiscuity.
It's really tough because they have a language built around it. Now they're going to have a different, now it's not mother and father, now it's parent, so now it's mother and father are interchangeable in marriage, which is really sad. And so I really think that is, when we hear the stories of the victims, for example, donor-conceived person, we have people who are donor-conceived now speaking out, saying, I have an identity crisis. I want to know who my father is. I want to know who I am.
Well, actually, Jennifer is working with a woman down in, I think
Elena
it's in New Orleans, who started a ministry based on that.
That's right.
Because they have a real hard time connecting and having relationships because they're concerned that maybe they're related to someone with whom they're getting involved.
Yes.
Can you imagine that?
I know. It's terrible. It's like as soon as you take, I said this, talked about this a lot in my book, Recall Abortion. I had a full chapter on children made to order. And that's what that is, treating children like a commodity, that you can create them just as you want. And it's really horrible.
Yes.
But to answer your question, Teresa, really, I think it depends on what you're looking at. If you look at the media, meaning television, video, movies, I think it's worse than ever before, right? Because it just keeps...
Well, and also pornography, which is off the charts, out of control, right?
It gets worse and worse, even just on regular TV. When I think about when I was growing up as a kid and what's on TV now...
How about the sitcoms, situation comedies, when the married couples were in separate beds?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah. I do. That's what it was when I was a kid. It was separate beds. You couldn't even be in the same bed.
You're too young to remember that.
Too young. But now, the sitcoms, just what I see just on regular family viewing
or even daytime TV.
Or daytime TV. It's horrible. So if you measure what the culture is showing people, and in the magazines, so suggestive, even the ads for jeans and clothing, it's so suggestive. I think it's getting worse. But if you talk about people who are practicing their faith, going to church on a regular basis, and trying to protect their family, so to speak, from it, I think it's getting better because people are seeing the damage within their own family.
And don't you think there are more people like the Jennifer Roback Morses in terms of having a ministry or an apostolate?
Right.
Or, for example, a Silent Lemore you mentioned, Priests for Life, your work in the Hispanic community, all the different Catholic organizations that are out there, Catholic media. We are at least, I think, better situated to address these problems than we were before.
Thanks be to God for Dr. Morse, because when the ruling from the Supreme Court on so-called gay marriage came out, everybody's celebrating, not everybody, but a lot of people in the culture were celebrating, and we were really heartbroken because we were thinking about those children, that would be permanently denied a father or a mother. So we were speaking out, and we were saying we're not trying to take anybody's happiness away. We believe God created man and woman for marriage, but these children that are innocent victims, again, children paying the price for the benefit of adults in the sexual revolution. So I think, thank God for people like Dr. Roback Morse and people in the family movement, Dr. Bill May and people like that, they were able to put some sense into the conversation out there in the media. It was a really difficult time for us to see what happened. But we have to continue to be a voice for these victims.
You know, the research is out there. We know this to show the fallout from so-called same-sex marriage and also contraception and abortion. And not too long ago on my radio show, I interviewed W. Bradley Wilcox, who's with the American Enterprise Institute, and they do a lot of research on the impact of healthy marriages between a man and a woman, not only on the family and the children in terms of how much better they do with two parents of the opposite sex who are married, right? But the impact that has on society.
Oh, yeah.
Crime levels are lower, the economy is stronger. So to say that you have no business in my bedroom or you can't tell me what to do, what I do in my home doesn't affect anyone, that's a very, very naive statement to make. Because everything that we do has had, whether it's good or bad, there's a fallout to it. Decisions we make have consequences, and the sexual revolution is an example of the consequences that are out there.
Well, I mean, one of the things I think that is so glaring is the cohabitating, because, and we know this from priests we've interviewed in the programs again for marriage prep, you know, and I know even three of my daughters when they all got married went through marriage prep. The big ha 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 is most of them are all living together. And they're sitting there to go through marriage prep where the church is saying, no, you shouldn't be living together. And they're not saying a word to the priest.
And they're contracepting.
And they're contracepting. Else, yeah. And they're planning to contracept, you know, right, you know, through, you know, after marriage too, until they decide they want to have a child. But the cohabitating, it's become almost like normal now. It's really normal. And it's hard to find, you know, married couples that are about to go to the altar that haven't lived together. It is hard to find.
And I gotta say, because of the divorce culture that just sees like it's no big deal, then a lot of people grow up heartbroken thinking, well, you know, I'm probably not gonna be successful in marriage, so why even go there? It's more of a fear that it will fail as opposed to not really caring about it.
Yeah, when we come back after the break, I wanna share a story with you. You know, Dominic and I work with Julie and Greg Alexander of the Alexander House, and we do a marriage cruise with them every year, and we were not too long ago on that cruise, and we were at a reception with the couples who joined us, and the hostess from the ship shared a story that was very sad because she was really admiring the fact that these were all couples who were working on their marriages and took time away to celebrate their marriage. But then she also said that even though her parents were married, that she could never see herself married.
Wow.
Despite the fact that she had a good example in her parents, and it has to do with the culture. And we'll talk about that and more regarding the fallout from the sexual revolution and the victims of the sexual revolution when we come back on this episode of The Catholic View for Women. Remember, viewer discretion advised. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to The Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo, Astrid Bennett Gutierrez, and Janet Morana continuing our discussion on the damage caused by the sexual revolution. And just a reminder that viewer discretion is advised because of the content. Before we go further, I do want to say a big shout out and a thank you to our pastoral director, Father Frank Pavone. He has a great quote that we're going to share on the fallout of the sexual revolution, in particular regarding marriage. Now, I was mentioning the incident that happened down the ship, and it was really, I think, very eye-opening for us because this was a lovely woman who said her parents were happily married, and we got into a discussion with her, and she said, you know, this is great. I'm glad to see this. I've never seen anything like this before. And we were telling her about what we did and blah, 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 and why we do the cruise. And we asked her, well, you know, are you interested in getting married? And she says, well, I would like to, but it's never going to happen. And we said, well, why? You're a beautiful young woman. You know, she says, well, it's really hard to trust someone. And you could tell that there was some pain there. And I said, but your parents, you have a great example in your parents are happily married. She says, I cannot imagine trusting someone for that long in my life. I just can't see doing it. And just to talk to her a little bit, it sounded like she had been hurt before. But again, in some way, I believe that she too was a victim.
Well, it goes back to really this
Yeah.
hookup culture of going from person to person to person, and then the idea of when you marry them, you're supposed to be with them forever. And then I guess she's responding to all that, feeling like, well, I don't know if I could do that. You know, like, oh, I don't know. That's
I think
forever.
she's seen a lot of friends who were divorced and separated.
That's right.
There are things biologically and psychologically that happen as a result of the sexual revolution and the hookup culture that people don't realize, and it's not out there because it's inconvenient. We want to continue on our lifestyle doing these things, but we don't want people to know really what the consequences are. Well, unfortunately, it comes later, that regret and that pain.
Well, also, if you just look at the number of sexually transmitted diseases, how many diseases there are now compared to when we were in high school or college, Janet. And if you look at also just the damage from abortion, not only the lives lost, but the physical damage, and of course the spiritual damage. So we could go on and on, but we want to get to the clip. So why don't you introduce the clip?
Well, of course, Jennifer Roback Morris, who we've all heard speak. I was at a conference recently. I had a chance to pull her aside and get a little interview with her. So let's hear what she had to say about her thoughts on the victims of the sexual revolution.
Was a series of ideas, basically. I define it with respect to 3 different ideas, and they're very seductive ideas, and so they've sort of wormed their way throughout the society, throughout the culture, because people haven't had the sort of insight to know how to stop them, to know how to argue against them. And so the 3 ideas, the way I define the sexual revolution: first, that a good society ought to separate sex from procreation. That's the first big idea. Very appealing idea, you know. We all thought it was going to be a lot of fun in the 60s to have sex without babies. And so now we're to the point where we're having babies without having sex, which I'm pretty sure is not as much fun as the old-fashioned way, but, you know, there we are. That concept is just working its way through every little nook and cranny of society, and it touches many, many things. So that's the first point. Sex and babies disconnect. The second idea of the sexual revolution is that you can separate both sex and babies from marriage. And the underlying idea there is that kids don't really need their parents. It's really kind of, you know, it's optional whether the parents are together. It's optional whether the kids are with one parent or both parents. Kids are resilient. That's the underlying big lie there. But you can see the appeal of this idea because it seems to say that adults can have whatever sex lives they want and not really have to worry about kids too much. That my relationship with my sex partner, my current sex partner, or my past sex partner, those relationships are more significant than my relationship with my child. And I can sacrifice my relationship with my child to my new sex life. And certainly my relationship with the child's other parent, that's completely expendable here, you know. And of course that's damaging to kids. So that's the second idea, that both sex and childbearing can be separated from marriage, which the underlying idea is that kids don't really need their parents. And then the final big idea of the sexual revolution is that men and women are completely interchangeable. Any differences you see between men and women are socially constructed and probably unjust, and therefore we can construct, reconstruct, deconstruct those facts about male and female, masculine and feminine. All of that can be redone at will. And you can kind of see the appeal of that too. It appeals to our idea of equality, fairness. All of those things are triggered by this idea that men and women are somehow not really so different after all. And so now that has unraveled to the point where we're talking about the concept that an individual can decide whether they are in fact male or female, that the body itself can be constructed or reconstructed or deconstructed to the wishes of the individual. So that's what we're dealing with the sexual revolution. Again, all 3 of these ideas are very appealing at a superficial level, but all 3 of these ideas are false. And that's why the sexual revolution has caused so much problem, so much heartache, so much woundedness, because people are trying to live their lives in accordance with these ideas, and it just can't be done, really.
And those are the 3 points that you brought out earlier. And if you go through each of these, we can think of all the stories that have made headlines in the last year or two, and it's just ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Where do we begin?
Right down the list.
And we were completely sold the bill of goods in so many ways, not just women, but men.
Well, you know, I can think all the way back to that phrase of that commercial, "You've come a long way, baby." You know, and
I say we've come a long way, maybe. Big question mark.
Right. And the idea of the career woman, you know, and you can have it all and all this.
That was me. That was me.
I mean, so many women have bought that and sacrificed having a family and everything for the career, and then get to that point where they couldn't have a child.
Well, we were told that career was paramount. The career was paramount above everything, and that if a a spouse or a baby got in the way, then that was their problem, not yours. And you were to do whatever you could, whatever you had to do to be successful. And in my business, in the news business, which is cutthroat beyond belief, you better be there for that story. You better work the weekends. You better work overnights, and you better be able to jump, into the news truck at a moment's notice, or else you're going to get somebody, pretty skinnier and cheaper to replace you.
Right.
Yes.
And we were told that consistently. And what I always tell people, because there's so many young women who want to go into broadcast media, and they want to be news anchors and newscasters, and I say, okay, but you have to be ready. You have to be very strong in your faith, and you have to make sure you have your priorities set, and you have to know when to say no. Exactly. And you have to be ready that if you say no, you may not succeed at this particular place because of what they're asking you.
Yeah,
that's right.
But you'll be a lot happier if you follow what you're meant to be.
It's the happiness.
Yeah.
Being a Hispanic, my mother grew up in Mexico, and so for her, these ideas, she was a little bit sheltered from what was happening in the 60s here in the United States, with the sexual revolution and all the things that happened in the 60s. So there's a big difference between how she grew up and the way I grew up. But I just traveled to Latin America recently. I was in Costa Rica, and you realize what happens here in the U.S., the progress, quote unquote, of the sexual revolution. It affects the rest of the world. And right now, Costa Rica is fighting against in vitro fertilization. The international community, the U.S., are pressuring countries like Costa Rica to accept in vitro and selling them the bill of goods that it's a good thing that's helping people to become parents. What they don't realize, talking to people just out there, they didn't realize that what happens in vitro is you're creating, human beings to possibly be destroyed. In the process, they have no idea what they're going to unleash, and it's obviously something that's going to make a lot of money for somebody. That's basically what's behind all this. It's just this permissiveness, this
it's all about
violation
me.
of life.
I want to be able to do whatever I want to do
It's
when,
capricious
with whomever, whether it's
well.
with I want to have the children the way, and they have to be the way I want them to be, and I'm going to create them the perfect children. What is your chapter called?
It's Children Made to Order.
Children Made to Order,
Right.
right?
But there's something better for them. For example, in vitro, I was telling them NAPRO technology is a better option. Yes, it takes more work and
But
some
who
patience.
hears about that unless
they're watching
us?
Contraception. There's a better way. There's natural family planning. And if you really want to bless your marriage and have a lasting marriage, you do the things like natural family planning that's going to strengthen your marriage. But of course, many people never find that out and go the easy way or the way that's available to them because
But
what
see,
they're
the reason why we're in this road is, first of all, because if you think about it, I got married when I was in my 20s. My daughters got married when they were in their mid-30s. This is what's happening. There's a whole generation now, they're getting married later and later. So what happens is they're sacrificing their best fertility years
For their careers.
Right. And then when they're getting married, they don't even want to start a family right away because we have to make sure we've got all our ducks in order.
Right.
We've got to get the house, we've got to get everything furnished, we have to go on a beautiful vacation every year. Then suddenly they always go, okay, now we're ready to have a child, and bingo, they can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
So in comes IVF. And I was just recently driving some friends to a place.
We only have 3 minutes left. I don't think we have time for that story because we have to get the homework in.
I can tell it real fast. What happened was,
okay.
the couple was practicing IVF, and they didn't realize that extra babies were being made. And it was after the procedure, and after the baby was born, the doctor came back and said, okay, well, how long are you going to start a contract for the frozen embryos? And they were horrified. They didn't realize we created all these children. Someone didn't explain it to them properly. They had to then go to the priest and go to confession and kind of deal with it. Tragic.
And
that's the
women.
problem.
It harms
it
women.
harms women too. And I did it in my book, Recall Abortion, an entire chapter on the damage physically it does to women.
Yeah. All right, so homework?
Homework. Well, first of all, we have to pray. We start with a prayer, and I don't have time to read it, but it's a beautiful prayer. It'll be on our Catholic View for Women website from St. Raphael, Archangel, an angel of healing. That's what the angel is known for in this beautiful prayer. And for all these problems and things we just mentioned, this is a beautiful prayer you can take and pray for that kind of healing. And of course, Teresa's book, Extreme Makeover, beautiful book available at the Religious Catalog, and it has several chapters that this is what this is
Right,
about.
there's a chapter on abortion distortion and contraception deception, then there's 5 testimonies, yours is in there,
Right.
of women who've either reverted to the church or have converted to Catholicism. Before we go, I do want to, can we read Father Frank's quote? Can you read it? Because I think it's really, really
So
important
Father
on
Frank,
marriage.
He's written repeatedly about the profound changes taking place regarding the redefinition of marriage by the courts and the transgender movement, and other fallout from the sexual revolution will follow the same path as legal abortion has followed, namely that what is first welcomed with the excitement of new rights being bestowed by the government will be followed down the road by the bitter regret disappointment, and pain that always comes when we defy human nature. Just as pain has come to so many who thought that just because the law permitted contraception and abortion, they could use it without negative consequences. As the Lord said, time will prove where wisdom lies.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so much to think about in that one quote. We'll put this on our website as well, The Catholic View for Women, so you can go back and reflect a little bit more on it. And don't forget Janet's book, Recall Abortion. We'll have a link there on our website as well. And also my book, Extreme Makeover. And again, as Janet said, The Prayer of Healing to Saint Raphael. Really good discussion. Right. And there are so many victims of the sexual revolution. But remember that God and the church teachings are always the answer. Thanks for watching. And again, you've been tuning in to The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. And please, once again, visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. We'll see you next time on The Catholic View. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.